Story 1. I was 7 years old when my mother ran into the room yelling, "I hate you! I hate you! You've ruined my life!" while grabbing my clothes out of the dresser and throwing them around the room. I'm 65 now and never really forgave her for it. Story 2. You're not really my friend, you're a boring person, someone who I had considered my best friend in 11th grade, and who had said I was hers up until then. 10 years later, and that statement still messes with my head when approaching friendships with other people. At least my therapist said that was a mean thing to say. Story 3. During my freshman year of college as a computer science major, my professor pulled me aside towards the end of the first semester and said, "Have you considered choosing a different major? I don't think you're cut out for computer science." The professor left the school 2 years later, but those words stuck with me. Fast forward 6 years, and I graduated with dual focuses in software engineering and video game development. She messages me on LinkedIn and says, "Congratulations on graduating. I didn't think you could do it, and I still don't think you can succeed in this field. You really should have considered doing something easier." I'm a senior engineer now, and it has been 9 years since I graduated. But those words still haunt me, especially with how challenging the current engineering job market is. Story 4. Overhearing my mom say to my dad, "I thought she would stay pretty and thin a lot longer than she has. He is going to cheat, and where's she going to go? Not home, I hope." I had driven down 6 hours to visit them, and up until then, my mom was my hero. I can't explain the hurt I felt because it felt unreal. I packed my bags and left without saying anything. I have moved past what she said because she's my only mother and I'm her only daughter. But I don't think I'll ever truly heal from hearing with my own 2 ears how disappointed she was that I gained a few pounds. Story 5. My boss called me into his office one morning and was super excited to tell me the general manager's son was coming into the office, and she wanted her son to shadow me for the day. The son had expressed interest in a career doing what I do. My boss made it sound like it was a great opportunity for me. Come to find out, the general manager handpicked me because she was trying to discourage her son from doing what I did for a living. Neither one of those two arrogant people in management understood how insulting that was. I was shocked. So that kid shadowed me all day, and I made sure he had a blast and understood how rewarding my career has been. He had the time of his life. Story 6. In secondary school, when I was 13, a classmate whom I knew from primary school as a friend asked me during a break, "Why are you sitting here? Who do you think is your friend here?" I was surprised by this sudden outburst. Even though I was a bit quiet, I had trouble during the first year of secondary school dealing with the bad breakup between my parents. I mentioned the name of another friend whom I thought was my best friend from primary school, but they didn't even respond. That was the moment I broke and started walking through the hallways by myself during breaks for almost a year and a half. Eventually, I found my way to the library, where there was apparently a group of outcasts hanging out every break, but I didn't realize that immediately. Story 7. You are acting like your father right now. It is the only time I have ever gone instant full stop, shut down, and left the house and started driving with no destination in mind. Story 8. My ill mom is telling me I'm mean and I should be nicer like my sister. Considering I'm the one cleaning the various bodily fluids my mom spills around her house daily, while my sister never helps because she's too busy having affairs with married men and going on vacation with money she stole from my mom, I take it as an insult. Story 9. I broke up with my then 3-year-old's mother and moved into a bedroom at my sister's. At mediation, my ex asked where my daughter sleeps when she comes to stay. I said with me. She then said, "What does it look like when a 43-year-old man is sleeping with a 3-year-old girl?" I walked out. I wasn't going to be dragged down to her level and have her beat me with her experience at that level. Story 10. Don't bother killing yourself because I'm going to kill you. My father said this to me after my dog ate my chocolate Easter bunny. I was 10 and had my first suicide attempt not even a month earlier. May he rot in hell. Story 11. My friend said to me when we saw my then boyfriend's ex-girlfriend inside a cafe, "Sorry to say, she's prettier than you. That hurts," but I didn't believe her. Story 12. I have a naturally round face. I had grandma call me fat face, and my father's second wife used to make fun of my round face. always and still conscious of this. Story 13. I was doing some shopping at Costco a while ago, and I walked past two people pushing a cart in the opposite direction. They clearly looked directly at me, and then one said something to the other in Spanish and then started laughing. I speak Spanish. They said something along the lines of, "My God, I can't believe they let the Walmart shoppers in here now." Look, I know I'm unattractive and I've heard it all before, but that one stung extra hard. Story 14. Someone told me that I was just going to kill myself. He was aware of my extensive history of depression. I punched him in the mouth. That is the only time that I have ever answered words with physical violence. There is a lot more to that story. He had been harassing me for months, and I just lost it. Story 15. Someone I used to work with in retail and who was doing a Doctor of Philosophy told me that I did not have the required intelligence to pursue a Doctor of Philosophy over a trivial matter at work. Well, I have not started a Doctor of Philosophy, but I am now a full-time lecturer at the university we are both in while she is still working on her Doctor of Philosophy to this day. Story 16. When I finally asked my mom why she started spoiling my 3-year younger brother when I turned 18, she responded, "Because I don't want your brother to grow up to be a wreck like you." She never told me anything like, "I love you." She let her husband beat me up for a whole 7 years while acting like it's completely normal. Story 17. My ex-wife called me lazy in our divorce after having worked 16 hours a day for 3 years to secure our future. I told a friend this, and they said, "You are a lot of things, but lazy isn't one of them." I didn't know how badly I needed to hear that. Story 18. Aren't you tired of feeling this way? It's been a year. Shouldn't you get over it? These are things people said to me after my uncle murdered my brother. It's been 20 years. I will never fully get over it. Nor did I choose to feel this way. It is unfortunate how often people are clueless and ignorant about post-traumatic stress disorder. Story 19. It was an insult created specifically because I was a quiet and shy kid with a low tone of voice. This happened back in middle school when I was around 13 or 14. Two girls I was friends with made up the insult during science class and got others to join in and bully me. Story 20. My mom told me how fat I looked while I was getting dressed for my grandpa's funeral. It was not the first or last time she said that, but it hurt that she couldn't go easy on her child in that situation. Story 21. Abusive boyfriend. Your mom is probably glad she got cancer and passed so she didn't have to be around you anymore. She was a single mom my whole life and passed when I was 15. I'll never forget those words. Story 22. My dad angrily declared that I was useless when I was about 11 or 12 years old because I couldn't find a screwdriver. My mother liked to say, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" As if that was a magical incantation that would transfer some of my brother's discipline into my head. It only made me depressed, which made it harder to concentrate, so I would get in more trouble, get berated again, get more depressed, and the cycle would repeat. It's strange that I was bullied by most of my classmates throughout school, and even into university and my first job, before I finally put on some size and started standing my ground. Hundreds of people would have been picking on me for any and every reason they could think of over those years. But those are the insults that still stand out as I approach 40. Story 23. I guess I should preface this by saying I started balding really early on. I got made fun of and received sniping comments for it endlessly from the end of high school, throughout college, and during the first few years of my career. I was always pretty satisfied with my physical appearance otherwise, but years of getting insulted for something I couldn't control got to me. I became fairly muscular over the COVID years, though, and finally felt like I at least looked okay even with it. When things were fully opening up again in 2022, I was at an anime convention held at a water park. I was cosplaying and took off the wig to go on water slides. As soon as I did, some guy turned to me and just said, "Yeah, you really should just keep that on." Story 24. When I was growing up, my parents gave me a complex that I'm very annoying, emotional, too much, etc. They would treat me as such an annoyance and a burden that it lived in me for over 30 years, thinking deep down that's all I was. As an adult, I was diagnosed with autism and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. My ex once turned and looked me in the eye and said, "You really are unbearable to be around." It stuck with me more than anything I've ever heard. Story 25. I fell in the shower when I was 8 months pregnant, and I yelled for my husband. He had the most disgusted look on his face. He said how lucky I was to have him because I'm fat and ugly and no one else would ever want me. He was wrong, but I still feel that 40 years later. Story 26. My mom never treated my kids very well. Not bad, but she wasn't really very loving towards them. Mom and I were talking about my oldest, who was 18 at the time, and had been dating the same guy for a few years. Mom says, "So what's going on with your daughter and her boyfriend? Are they going to get married?" I say, "I don't know. I mean, it's possible." Mom says, "I just don't know that I'm ready to be a great grandmother." Well, you could always try being a good one first. Story 27. You are going to be barefoot and pregnant, just like your mother, said my father, who was 17 when he impregnated my 15-year-old mother. This happened when I was 13. Story 28. When I told my art teacher that I was applying to transfer to an art-centered high school, she told me it was a waste of time and that I clearly didn't have the skills to succeed, let alone get into a different school. Art had been my entire life at that point, and I couldn't imagine doing anything else. Every free moment was spent drawing or painting. I had won awards. Joke's on her. I got into that art high school and then every art school I applied to after graduation. 20 years later, I make a passable living solely on my art. Looking back, she was probably just a sad old woman who was mad that her own art never amounted to anything. It still stings sometimes, though. Story 29. At the young age of 30, I had been sick and trying to figure out what was wrong for a while. This was well known. I spent the whole of the year before getting tested from one hospital to another. I was at my mom's house. We had a complicated relationship. I was telling her how scared I was because the cancer word was starting to be thrown around and I was getting referred to a hematologist, a blood specialist. I was exhausted and feeling defeated and also angry that I was facing this at such a young age, even after taking really good care of myself. She responded, "How do you think I feel? I have to go through a divorce because your father decided to leave me. Cool. The guy you mistreated and controlled and nagged and bullied incessantly for the last 20 years of your 35-year marriage has decided he finally will leave instead of ending his life because he'd been thinking about it. But yeah, go on. Tell me how that's worse than your child dying. Prove to me that day that this woman would never be able to even feel true compassion. That's the day I decided I was out. It's been 3 glorious years of being motherless, and it's so worth it." Story 30. From my 4-year-old daughter while I was changing my shirt. "Oh, Dad, you have breasts like Mom, but you have little breasts. I've always been self-conscious about my figure." Story 31. I was once told that I was unplanned and that my dad was not happy when my mom was pregnant with me. Of course, he was a great dad to me, and I would have never known that until someone else told me after my dad passed away. I asked my mom, and she admitted it was true, thanks to my estranged brother, whom I no longer talk to. Story 32. I was at a school music concert, and I was in the audience. I was looking forward to seeing my younger brother play, and I was told as he came on stage, "Oh, look, it's your brother. He's more talented than you'll ever be." That stuck with me ever since. I was 15 at the time. I'm 30 now. Story 33. Someone once told me I reeked of desperation. That became a turning point in my life where I stopped reaching out to people, showing any kind of vulnerability, or being at all visible. To this day, I don't really speak to people unless spoken to. Story 34. You are troubled in the head. You won't end up with any friends if you continue to be negative. They don't like you. I said I was feeling hopeless to a friend, and she yelled at me and said I was weak. My parents told me that I put on too much weight and asked when I will be stopping the medication. When I lost weight, my ex said I looked like I had an illness. You are coddled and spoiled. You are probably a burden to your parents, according to a support worker. My mother said she doesn't want to deal with my mental health for the last years of her life. There is more, but I don't want to think about it. People are cruel, which has made me angry and bitter, mainly because of the way I've been treated. Story 35. Honestly, a simple "you smell really bad" It messed with my brain and killed my confidence. I was slowly rebuilding so much that even 20 years later, if I smell something bad, I'll think it's me until I find the source of the smell. Story 36. During a toxic argument, after leaning over to the bedside table and picking up a card I gave her that day, she quickly scanned it for ammunition to use to hurt me. It was full of my expressions of love and being honest and vulnerable about my feelings. After finding something, she said, "I hope you have to cuddle a pillow at night for the rest of your life, and that no one who loves you ever lays next to you." The context would take too long to explain, but I have never had a loved one so deliberately and maliciously try to cut my heart open. Naturally, we didn't work out,